Before we get underway, I want to ask a question. Have you ever viewed video games as a means of paying for your personal shortcomings and failures? Have you ever been playing, say for random example, Mega Man Battle Network and thought to yourself, yeah, this is good, but I wish every single boss encounter was an adrenaline rush of non-stop onslaughts on my person? Do you enjoy being thrown on the ground over and over again? Well, that's a very particular set of tastes, but as it turns out, I have a game just for you. Welcome to One Step from Eden. So when someone says, hey, do you want to play a roguelike indie title that plays like a spiritual successor to Mega Man Battle Network, the sentence wouldn't even need to be completed for me to sign on board. Thus, you might understand my enthusiasm when told about One Step from Eden, which is more or less precisely what I described. Released just earlier this year, this indie title has been the recipient of some truly unreal praise, so it was just a matter of time before I picked it up for myself to see what the fuss was all about. And before I prattle off all these names, I want to lay down a preemptive apology, as there is no way I'm getting through this and pronouncing each and every one correctly. The dev team is headed by Thomas Moon Kang, credited as dev, designer, sound lead, and pixel artist. Composers credited as Keisuke Hayase, character and CG art by Katie Seren Singhasena, I'm sorry I tried, and several other sound and art teammates whose names I'm just going to spare my incompetent butchering at this point. The plot, at least as far as I can tell given the game has no time for such pleasantries, is that you are striving towards a city called Eden, a place of abundant resources and presumably is not filled to the gills with random wildlife and robots that want you dead. Seeing as how everywhere you go, be it forest, ruins, volcanoes, or even the barren Arctic, is full of precisely just that. Faced with this grim world that, based on character bios, runs on half magic and half technology, literally any place has to be superior to just hanging around and waiting for the world to off everyone. So they proceed to Eden fully contented on offing each other first in the process. First and foremost, the game looks great. The character portraits are all fantastic and detailed, and the pixel art's out of this world. The sprites are incredible, amazingly smooth, and tons of tween frames. The effort and love poured into this game is really on the screen. The enemies are well detailed as well. There's an infinite number of projectiles covering the screen any one time, if you have the chance to look at them and dodge them at the same time. The backgrounds are static images, conveying the local scenery of the themed zones you enter. But again, you won't be looking at these too much as your attention really should be front and center. Likewise, I really dig the music in this game. It's this aggressively fast-paced techno-rock fusion that just permeates the entire experience. It's seriously electric stuff in more than one way. And the sound effects are on point. You'll hear plenty of the latter, believe me, since after a certain point in your progress, every single one of them will indicate danger. I suppose that sounds like a cop-out, but let me explain a bit more at length and perhaps this'll be a bit clearer for those who haven't yet figured it out. At its heart, One Step from Eden is a roguelike game primarily focused on the different battle types you'll find spread out across 8 maps of semi-randomly generated options. As soon as you pick your character, of which you can unlock more as time goes on, you will immediately be plunked into a 4x8 grid of squares and besieged on all sides by all manner of enemies. And if you're wondering where I was going with the whole Battle Network comparison, wonder no longer. Each half of the field is broken up into 4x4 grids, one of which you can move around in on the left and the other reserved for enemies on the right. Your chosen hero begins with 4 spell cards that, once expended, can be reshuffled into the deck and used again. Plus, they'll all have a default attack which, excepting the main character Saffron, will use a bit of the ever-regenerating mana meter to execute, which builds up over time when you're not casting spells. I won't get into the nitty-gritty on that, as a lot of the details are character-specific, but suffice it to say, you'll have your options open. You then use these abilities until your enemies are dead, whereupon you'll get the chance to look at your map. Each different icon on the map screen gives you an idea of what you'll be doing next, and oftentimes you'll have to make a choice between multiple paths. But since you can see the entire map ahead of you at any given time, you can make the choice that most benefits you in the long run. Most of these will be simple battles, but the game will spice it up with things like mid-bosses, rescue missions where you need to save imperiled NPCs, campsites where you can restore health a little, and emergency spaces that, after a certain point, You'll encounter one, die horribly, and never do them again because oh my god, they are not worth it once the game starts ramping up in difficulty. Clearing most of these will net you a spell card where you can choose one of 3 options, and sometimes the more difficult encounters will offer up an artifact as well. A passive persistent buff that can be as broadly useful as more mana capacity, or a damage buff, or as useless and contextual as when you deal freeze damage, you'll also deal a little more freeze damage. And since these are randomized each run, there's also no guarantee that they'll necessarily be useful, but I have found myself adapting mid-course to different playstyles, like the time I tried out the Shield Maiden, Riva, and ended up getting nothing but spell cards that buff my shields, so that was pretty cool. When a run comes together really well like that, it's a really amazing feeling, I must say. At the end of each map set, you'll then engage in a boss fight, which is where things can really go off the rails. While they start off tame enough, each time you clear one of these, you'll enter into a new map, picked from one of 3 themes after clearing the last boss encounter. Then you'll go to the next map set, whereupon the overall difficulty ticks up. Also, there's a hidden stat called Luck, which is a double-edged sword. You're more likely to encounter rare goodies, but it also ups the overall difficulty as well, and this stat slowly builds up over each map. So where am I going with this kinda rambly paragraph? Well, you know those boss fights? They build up over time too. And if you want to unlock all the playable characters, you better get good at them. At higher difficulties, even Shisho, the laughably easy edgelord, can become a mild irritation. Everyone else can become an enormous and overpowering threat as they throw progressively more ridiculous attack patterns at you. But beat them, and the game will give you a moment to make a choice. Do you kill your rivals en route to Eden and steal their power, or let them off the hook? Better yet, this is more than mere story contrivance, as this decision not only impacts the ending you'll get, it will also have mechanical repercussions. If you kill the boss fights off, you'll gain more weapons and power-ups than normal. Sparing them, however, not only gives you a health recovery before entering the next map, you'll gain their cooperation. While somewhat random, at the start of fights, I've seen other bosses leap in and attack enemies before the fight gets underway, or in moments when I was knocked down to 1 HP and the enemies were given the "finish him" prompt, they would leap in, intercepting the attack on my behalf, healing me and putting me back in the game. As a result, I tend to play Mr. Nice Guy even if the game has no interest in repaying the favor. If you lose in a boss fight, probably the most likely way to die in this game, the game will straight up make you bite the curb and finish you off in rather unsettlingly brutal fashion. Thank goodness for proactive friends, I say. Not only is this brilliant game design by tying intimately the gameplay to the player's choices, it creates entirely unique risk-reward options the player needs to weigh as they progress. And basically, you repeat the above few paragraphs over and over until you win, or more than likely, die and start over. That has been the sum of my many hours thus far, but there is an undeniable charm to the game that makes it so I'm not even really frustrated when it happens, in part because you'll always be unlocking things. See, as you progress, you'll gradually gain level ups. When you bite the bullet, these will be dumped into a pool which unlocks more and more stuff as you progress. And getting good and beating bosses past the midway point also unlocks them as playable characters. I actually unlocked a good number of them before I even realized the cause and effect on that one, but since you'll keep unlocking additional artifacts and spell cards, it changes the nature and flow of future runs. It means that even if you die ignobly, you still make your future attempts better for yourself each time you try. Was there anything about the game I didn't like? Well, I can't beat it for one. But then again, I said the same thing about Noita, and a few months later I pulled that off. Plus, I made it to the 6th boss of a set of 8, so I'm not outside the game's skill set, or at least I don't think I suck that much. I really don't know where to go from here. The game's fantastic. Maybe a bit more lore would be nice, a story mode or something. The most we glean from the game comes from character bio pages, and that's neat and all, but I do wish I had a bit more context for what was happening. And this last one is kind of a spoiler, so if you don't want to know, jump ahead to the listed timestamp scene here. The only real thing is there is no neutral ending, and the game gives you no clue about this until it slaps you with it at the last moment. If you're going to spare or kill the bosses, the game wants you committed to it. This also means the genocide run by far is the more difficult option, because that means you also need to kill the bonus boss, or you're treated to a backhand of an ending anyway. I do hope that some kind of future patch or update answers this complaint in particular, as it would also enhance the game's replay value considerably. But that's just me. But overall, how does it stack up? As a game, it's pretty darn great. As an indie game, it's downright amazing. It's super easy to pick up and play, learning the game's fairly simple controls and mechanics, but it would take some true dedication to really master it. The mechanics are brilliant, the game feels intuitive, the characters are all colorful and brilliantly designed. The flavor text on spell cards and artifacts is hilarious, and the challenge just makes me keep coming back for more and more and more. It's everything a tight, brisk, action-packed roguelike should be, and I'll be keeping an eye on this particular dev team for whatever their next big idea is. Because if this is the level of passion found in their work, whatever comes next will have to be at least as amazing as One Step from Eden. My recommendation? Pick it up today on PC, PS4, and Nintendo Switch right now. This has been the One Snek from Eden, bringing to you today another bit of N-D-X-Cellence. If you like today's game, hit that like button so I know. If you want more like this each week, tap the subscribe and bell icons too. It really helps out a lot. For more from me and my closest bros, you can also check out the Tomodachi Bros Podbean and YouTube channels, or our enormous pile-up of social media accounts. All links in the description of every video, every time. Thanks for watching to the end, and as always, you can join me here every week for my obscure reviews, N-D-X-Cellence, Snek Sweets, and more. And I will see you there.